Bhavishyata will take birth. Tava, your. Abhadrao, two contemptuous sons. Abhadre, O unlucky one. Jatara Adamo, born of a condemned womb. Lokan, all planets. Sapalan, with their rulers. Trin, three. Chandi, haughty one. Muhu, constantly. Akrandayishyata, will cause lamentation. Translation. O haughty one, you will have two contemptuous sons born of your condemned womb. Unlucky woman, they will cause constant lamentation to all the three worlds. Responsively, please. O haughty one, you will have two contemptuous sons born of your condemned womb. Unlucky woman, they will cause constant lamentation to all the three worlds. Purport. Contemptuous sons are born of the condemned womb of their mother. In Bhagavad Gita 140 it is said, when there is a deliberate negligence of the regular principles of religious life, the women as a class become polluted, and as a result there are unwanted children. This is especially true for boys. If the mother is not good, there cannot be good sons. The learned Kashyapa could foresee the character of the sons who would be born of the condemned womb of deity. The womb was condemned because of the mothers being too sexually inclined and thus transgressing all laws and injunctions of the scriptures. In a society where such women are predominant, one should not expect good children. So we see here that Kashyapa Muni is continuing with his, I guess you could say, in a sense, chastisement, because he's actually quite upset. With his wife for persisting, but as we can see from the previous discussion, that he felt indebted to his wife, so he didn't give in. He did give in. Sorry, he didn't resist the pushings of his wife. But then we can see, that's okay. Thanks. Yeah, we can see, like in the lives of great devotees, and I've mentioned this a few times, such as Thakur Haridas and many other great personalities, when there was the temptation was before them, they resisted that temptation because understanding the results of giving to such temptation. And we see here, even though Kashyapa is a greatly advanced person, he obviously had attachment to his wife, but strong attachment to his wife, because even though he knew it was improper to give in and engage in sex with her, still he didn't resist, he gave in, and as a result we can see the outcome. And you know, we can understand to some extent that the Lord's hand was here also, because as I mentioned the other day, we see how these two great demons were born, and we see that, you know, like Prabhupada here does mention, in a society where such women are predominant, one should not expect good children. Obviously he's talking about Western society, because we see that in this Western world, I mean, practically speaking, everything they sell on television or in the media in any way is sold by one product: sex life. Everything's focusing around it. And so we can see how the society, this whole notion of sex life is very prominent. I mean, like, you'll see, like, you know, because living in the country you get to see advertisements like this a bit. They're selling a chainsaw, right? And they don't have some big butch guy with his lumberjack clothes on and stuff like that holding the chainsaw, because that's the type of person who uses a chainsaw. No, they have some girl clad in a scanty bikini holding the chainsaw. What's she got to, like, who in the world would use a chainsaw with clothes like that on? It's just so foolish. If like something kicks off, or the blade kicks off the machine, you've got problems. If you dress like that. But you'll see that usually they have gloves on, they have pants on, and even now they sell these pants that if the chainsaw rips on the pants, it doesn't actually cut through. So people wear protective clothing when they're doing things like that. But when they're selling the product, they've got some girl in a bikini, which is a bit bizarre, to tell you the truth. But that in this age, this is the prime motivating factor. Therefore, they use it to sell. And advertising, actually, people in the advertising industry are very intelligent like that in terms of selling their product, because they know what motivates people. I remember years ago, Sridhar Maharaj, he had done some research, and he was researching into how the advertising companies target people in a particular way by understanding what it is that motivates them. So it's just like when you go into a shopping mall, for instance, they're playing music, nice music. Why? Because they want you to stay in the mall, because the longer you stay in the mall, the more likely you are to buy something. And everything's nice and clean, and you've got these lovely glass windows, and all the lighting makes everything look sparkly and shiny, and the whole thing is just designed to allure you to buy something. So, they've done research in various ways with selling products. For instance, like if you have like sometimes you go into the shop and they'll have stuff just packaged up, pre-packaged, but other times they'll have stuff like fruits and vegetables and stuff. It's all kind of just open, so you can select your own. Because what they found is when they do that, like. People will just pick, oh, that's a nice one, okay, oh, that's nice, yeah, oh, that one's even nicer. And just because of the tactile engagement with the product, you feel, oh, this one, the avocado, this feels good. And you get another, oh, this feels even better. Maybe there's another one that's even, because it just inspires the senses to want to get more and more. So they've actually done a lot of research with these sort of things, and they know how to present a product in such a way that you want to buy it, even though you don't need it. And some of these computer companies are very, very expert at it. They sell you a product you never even knew they convince you need it, and you never even knew you needed such a thing. Like mobile phones. I remember, like, if you go back, I don't know, maybe about 20 years, who had a mobile phone? Who'd ever even heard of a mobile phone? We got by just fine without them. But now it's like, you walk around, you've got your mobile phone in your hand practically all day long. Can't live without it. And if you lose your phone, my gosh, it's a calamity. You can lose your kids, that's okay, but you lose your mobile phone, that's like really bad, So, anyhow, this whole society is just really sort of messed up, because we're becoming dependent upon these things we don't really need. And the point that's made here is Prabhupada's pointing out how, because Kashyapa, because he became dependent upon his wife, in essentially in an unhealthy way. There's healthy dependence, there's unhealthy dependence. So he became overly attached to his wife, and therefore, when she was pushing him to have sex, he gave into it, even though he knew what would be the outcome of it, because he was actually a very, very elevated sage, and so he could see the outcome from particular activities, because he was largely situated in the mode of goodness. But at this point, he actually gave into it. But still, we can see, even from the way he responded, immediately he went straight back into his religious duties. He satisfied his wife and he went straight back to his religious duties. But now, because she was praying to him that, please let my children be, good children. Don't let them be killed by this one. Don't let them be killed by that one. And then now he's saying, actually, these children from your womb are actually going to be very, a great disturbance to the world, because they're going to be very great demons. But then also we can see, because Kashyapa and Diti themselves are very great personalities, therefore the children they had were great personalities, even though they were demonic. They're very, very great, very, very powerful. So powerful, in fact, that it's described in the 7th canto how Hiranyakashipu, he took over the function of all the demigods. Every one of them, he just took over the function. And he was so powerful that the trees were constantly giving flowers and always giving fruits. All the flower-bearing trees and the fruit-bearing trees, all year round. Because usually we see they do it in season, but he was so powerful, and out of fear of him, they were bearing fruit and flowers all year round. So, not ordinary personalities. And so that helps us to understand that Kashyapa and Diti, because like an ordinary personality cannot give birth to someone of that caliber. So we can see that also Kashyapa and Diti were not ordinary personalities, very, very powerful personalities. But there's a few Prabhupada quotes here from the Bhagavad Gita, 140. So there's a string of verses here, which I thought were particularly interesting, because what's happening is in the Gita is Krishna's trying to encourage Arjuna to fight in a war. Arjuna's thinking it's irreligious, but Krishna's explaining to him, actually this is a religious war. Why? Because I want it. Because Krishna wants the war. He wants to see that these people who are irreligious are removed from the planet. But Arjuna's thinking wrongly that this is irreligious because we're going to kill all these. Because essentially every Kshatriya, there's a few that weren't there, but largely speaking, every ruler on the planet was there at that time. There was there was one person, I can't remember his name, who the Pandavas, because he was really proud, both the Pandavas and the Kauravas wouldn't accept him. But essentially every ruler on the planet was there. And Arjuna could see that, because the Kshatriya code was when you were in a battle, is either you won or you were killed. There was no kind of, middle ground where you kind of declare a truce and it's okay. That they fought till the death. And because we can see that the Kaurava side was, I think there was something like 11 Akshahini divisions on the Kaurava side and 7 on the Pandavas or something like that. So they were vastly outnumbered. And still, Krishna wanted to fight. But Arjuna had this confidence because Krishna was on his chariot. He knew he would win because he had faith that, because he had Krishna on his side. Whereas Duryodhana was thinking, I've got Krishna's army, so I'm going to win. Because he was placing his faith in numbers, whereas Arjuna was placing his faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. And the non-devotee will think, I've got all the best toys, so therefore I'm in the better position. But a devotee's going to think, no, I've got Krishna on my side, so this is the better position. And so we see that, Krishna was trying to, actually he did convince Arjuna. At the beginning he was trying to convince Arjuna to fight this war. But anyhow, so Arjuna, he offers this reasoning to Krishna. And there's just 3 verses here. He says, with the destruction of the dynasty, the eternal family tradition is vanquished, and thus the rest of the family becomes involved in irreligion. When irreligion is prominent in the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become polluted, and from the degradation of womanhood, a descendant of Vrishni becomes unwanted progeny. Now this is a really important point, and Prabhupada quotes this here, is like when the mother and father are degraded, then it's natural they're going to have polluted children, polluted progeny, because it describes, it says, yata yonim yata bijam, as the mother and father, so the child. So it's very unusual that it might happen, or it's a little bit difficult to expect that if the parents are not religious, that the children will be religious. It's very unusual that happens. Unless, of course, they come into contact with a greatly advanced devotee or with transcendental literature or something like that. But generally we find that if the parents are irreligious, then naturally the children will be irreligious. And then the last verse I want to read from, an increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performance for offering them food and water are entirely stopped. So Arjuna is rationalizing with Krishna what would be the outcome of killing all these personalities on the battlefield. And, he thinks he's got really good arguments. But then we see in the beginning of the second chapter that Krishna basically calls him a fool. He says, while speaking learned words, you're lamenting for that which is not worthy of grief. Because a wise person laments neither for the living or the dead. Because see, Arjuna's whole thing is like, and it's really interesting, if you kind of analyze it from the perspective of the Acharyas, Arjuna, he sees the chariots on the other, he sees all the soldiers on the other side. He wants to go and check out who's there. He already knows who's going to be there. But he just thinks, no, let me have a look. Because he's hoping to avert the war. That's his aspiration. And then so he says to Krishna, he said, put my chariot, bring my chariot in the middle, in the middle of the army, so I can see who's here to fight. Who wants to assist the evil-minded son of Duryodhana. Duryodhana. Not evil. What's his name? Dhritarashtra. Sorry, Duryodhana is the evil-minded son. He wants to see who's there. And then it mentions that, I can't remember the verse, but it says, Drona Bhishman's, you probably know the verse, Pramukhata. It's really interesting because pra is like it's a prefix that amplifies. Prabhupada uses a lot this prakrishta rupena. He talks about how it really amplifies the word mukhata. So mukha means in front of the face, but right in front of them, not just anywhere. Krishna knew the persons that Arjuna was most attached to there, meaning Bhishma and Drona. So he put his chariot right in front of Bhishma and Drona, right in front of their faces, so he could not miss that they were on the other side. Why? Because he wanted to, bring out this kind of emotional attachment in him and help him to break this attachment. Because understanding that this attachment would be an obstacle for him performing his duty. And it's exactly what we see happen. Arjuna started to, this whole sort of, the verses I just read there, he's not really so much worried about the whole family tradition and stuff like that. I mean, he's using that as a reason. What he's really worried about is he doesn't want to kill Bhishma and Drona, because he knew he would have to do it. That's what it's about. So, and we see that the whole sequence of the Gita, how Krishna is giving all these different rationale and reasonings why he should do it. But ultimately he gets to the point, it's because what I want you to do, Arjuna. And it's a really, really interesting sequence. And then we see, in the beginning of the second chapter, how Arjuna, he casts aside his bow and says, Govinda, I shall not fight. And then Krishna gets on his case, basically, and just tells him, this is wrong. So, it's interesting that Prabhupada brings that up, because he basically he's talking about the point of in this verse and purport, about how when you have irreligious children or irreligious family, irreligious children are a result, and this brings distress to the world. And we see, like in this day and age, just like obviously we're very aware of the war that's going on in Ukraine and the different things that are happening. This is a result. This is not a result of religiosity. That one country wants to invade another and try to exploit the resource or whatever. It comes from irreligiosity. And we see here, this verse also, is quite, Kashyapa is making very strong points. Like first off, he says, Bhavishatas Tava. So he says, Bhavishatas means like taking birth, Tava means your, Abhadra. So when he uses the word your, he's talking about your womb, essentially. So from your womb is going to come two Abhadra, inauspicious sons. They're very, very, or actually Prabhupada translates it as contemptuous. So Bhadra, the word Bhadra means like gentle or kind. And so they're going to be Abhadra. They're not going to be gentle or kind. They're going to be very, unpleasant people. And we see they cause havoc, and this will be described in detail later on. They'll be described, in synopsis later on in this canto, but in detail, particularly Hiranyakashipu and the way he terrorized the world is described in the seventh canto. And then in the next line he says, Abhadre, So again, he talks about this unfortunate. So he's referring to Diti, that you're an unfortunate one because you're going to have these inauspicious children. And Jata Adhamal, so born of a condemned womb. So Jatara is referring to the womb, but Adhamal means, again, fallen. Just like we sing in the morning, the Guru Vandana song, Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu, Adama Janara Bandhu. So the Guru, he's an ocean of mercy, and he's he's a friend of the fallen. Janara Bandhu. Bandhu means friend. So he's very, very friendly towards the fallen. And so, we see here, like, there's several verses here where Kashyapa is describing, the outcome here. And then we see that Srila Prabhupada, he focuses on, especially in the previous purport, how to counteract the effect of this inauspiciousness. And then he focuses at the end of the purport on how, through the process of Krishna consciousness, and that we can overcome the effect of this inauspiciousness. Because we're saying here that the Prabhupada at the end of the purport, he says, in a society where such women are predominant. So he's really making a strong point there, that in this society, this type of person is predominant in the world. Therefore, how can we expect good children? But through the process of Krishna consciousness, we can see that the adharma become the dharma. Instead of being fallen or inauspicious, they become auspicious or elevated. So the process of Krishna consciousness, and it's really, really simple in effect, because if we look at the processes throughout the ages, you can start off with the Satyuga, a very, very difficult process. We had to sit down and meditate upon the Lord for many, many thousands of years. And of course people had longer lives then, but still you had to spend most of your life engaged in meditation, and maybe, not always, but maybe you achieve perfection. And then as the ages progressed, the process and people's character became more and more degraded, then the process of bhakti became, or achieving love of Godhead became, or achieving perfection at least, became simpler. To the point where we see in Kali Yuga the most degraded of all the ages, and this is, Prabhupada's talking about this here in the previous purports. We can see how in this age people are addicted to sex life, intoxication, gambling, and meat eating. The four irreligious principles, the four most prominent irreligious principles, and this is actually a standard of life. It's a way of life. Like where there's the room I'm staying in right now. If you look out the bedroom window, you see all the vehicles going past, right? And the buses have like alcohol advertisements on it, sex advertisements on it, meat eating advertisements, and gambling. That's all they have. That's all they talk about is irreligious activities. And it's glorified. It's glorified, if you drink this beer, you're going to be happy. Or if you eat this meat, you're going to be fit and healthy, all this kind of stuff. And it's just and that's the nature of this age, is irreligious activities are glorified. And the funny thing is, they want to be happy. Everyone wants to be happy. Their aspiration is to be happy. And they're thinking by performing irreligious activities, they'll become happy. But actually we see, by performing irreligious activities, what's the result? Distress. Because, they're victimizing, the poor living entities, like who get killed in the slaughterhouses. They're killing the child in the womb. They're taking intoxication. When they take intoxication, they behave in all sorts of, abominable ways. And, the list just goes on and on and on. Yet they're thinking that by performing these activities they become happy, but they don't understand actually what is the essence of civilized life. These religious activities of not eating meat, not taking intoxication, not engaging in illicit sex, not gambling. This is the very fabric of life now, these irreligious activities. But previously, it was considered fallen. If we look, even we can go back a few hundred years, not that long ago, in West Bengal, for instance, people just didn't, it wasn't common that people did things like that. And still you can go to certain parts in India, and not just in India, in other parts of the world, where you'll find where small villages and things like that where people don't engage in these activities. And also you'll find in the cities, in big cities, these things are much more prominent than if you go out into these small rural areas. Even like, where was it? In Brisbane. I was in Brisbane the other day walking down the street, and just like the way the ladies were dressing compared to the way they dress where I live in Mawullumbar, which is, it's not a small town. I think it's got about 7,000 or 8,000 people in it. But you can see the difference just in that. So we can see how how things have become degraded, and even from the country to the city, the difference in the degradation, and therefore we can see, like, when you live in the city, it's a much more stressful, generally speaking, a much more stressful situation, and there's a lot more pressure to engage in sense gratification, etc. So, as we see that Prabhupada's explaining here and in the previous purport, through the process of bhakti, through the process of Krishna consciousness, and especially, as he mentions at the end of the previous purport, through taking up this simple process given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then one can easily overcome the influence of this age. But if we just engage ourselves in the activities that everyone else is doing in this age, then we're just going to be caught up in that same cycle. So very, very important to understand this process. Firstly, I think that firstly we need to understand our situation in this world, and understand how what's going on is affecting us, and not just us but everyone. And then we need to understand how to become free from that. Because without the thing is, like, if we don't realize we're in a difficult situation, we don't realize we're suffering, then there's no impetus to get free from that. Like if a person, thinks they're in a good... It's just like, there's an interesting verse in the, I think it's later on in the third canto, where Kapila Dev is talking to Devahuti, and he points out, I've forgotten the Sanskrit, but he mentions that the living entity finds, in whatever species of life they appear, they find a particular satisfaction in that species, and they're never averse to it. So even and then Prabhupada in the purport, he tells this story about when Indra became a pig, and how even though he was the king of heaven, and obviously in his situation the king of heaven, very, very opulent lifestyle, great wealth, beautiful wife, etc., etc., all the nice foods to eat, nice clothes to wear, whatever's desirable in material life, he has that. And because of his offense to his guru, then he was cursed to become a pig. But the interesting thing is, like, when he's situated as Indra, he's thinking, I've got such a nice life, I've got such a beautiful wife, I get to eat all the nice things, all the best foods, things like that. And when he goes to the pig body, he thinks exactly the same thing. Because of the particular set of senses, the guna and karma, that causes one to take on the body of a pig, causes one to think that this is a beautiful life. But then for us, we look at that and we think, okay, maybe in Sydney you don't see pigs so much, but if you go to places like Vrindavan and some of the villages in India, you get to see what pigs are like. And for us it's a very abominable situation, but for them they're thinking, wonderful, I like this. And so the same thing, we can see the same thing here in the material life, in the material world. It's like whatever situation a person finds himself in, they find that, that's great, I like this, it's very nice. Getting drunk every night, beating up my wife, this is a really good life. They're not averse to it, because they don't understand, they don't appreciate a higher position. So, and this is because of their polluted consciousness. But when one actually understands that the situation I'm in, this is not my natural position, this is not where I belong, this is not the ideal position for a living entity, then there's a possibility of reawakening that original consciousness. But until we come to this point of accepting this is actually not what it's all about, then and this is a point that Sanatana Goswami, when he was in a conversation with Lord Chaitanya, he was saying that people, they glorify me as being a great personality, because he was a very, very elevated soul. He was very deeply absorbed in the study of scriptures and things like that. But then in his humility, he was expressing to Lord Chaitanya. He says, but actually, they're glorifying me, but I don't even know who I am. I think I'm this body, and I don't know why I'm suffering the burning threefold miseries. So he's pointing out that, out of humility, he's taking on the position of all the ordinary living entities, but he himself is actually an eternally liberated soul. So we can see, he's giving us this understanding of actually, we don't know who we are, and we don't know why we're suffering. This is the position of everyone in this world. But if we can actually come to this understanding, that this is like a preliminary understanding of why I'm in this situation. This is not a good situation to be in, why I'm here. If we can come to that position of questioning why, then this will be the beginning of our journey to try to find out, what is the actual situation, who I am, and why I'm here. And not only that, how do I get out? Because it's no good just being caught up in the why of why am I here. That's not going to help you get out. You need to actually find out the way out. Prabhupada would sometimes talk about the sheep in the well, or the sheep in a hole. The sheep falls down in the hole, and he's just thinking, well, how did I get down here? But actually, that's not really relevant. What's really relevant is how do you get out? And so this is ultimately where we have to go, is to understand how do we get out of this situation. And it's a very, very difficult situation, this material world. People are struggling very hard. As in the Gita it says, Manasastan Indriyani Prakatishthani Kashati. They're struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. And they're struggling, to pay their bills, to keep the car going, to keep their job. And we see that as things are progressing, this struggle is increasing. There's so much more competition for people who are working to keep their jobs, and even their co-workers, rather than being helping each other, they're trying to, especially in the corporate world, they're trying to pull each other down because they, well, he's got a better job than me, he gets more pay than me, I want that job. So that I hear this from devotees all the time, working in these different situations, how their co-workers are always trying to pull them down. And so that's just the nature of this world. But okay, we're in this situation, and it's good to know how you got there, but this is not really the essence. The essence is how do we get out of this situation? And this is where the process of Krishna consciousness is so important, and especially the process given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because it's the perfect process of this age, and it's so simple to execute, and also it's very, very effective. So effective that if we apply ourselves to this process in one life, we can return back to the spiritual world. So, yeah, finish there. Any discussion on that at all? Prabhu? So I didn't hear the point you made before that.
What I was thinking was, if he was intensely praying, she understood the mistake was happening.
Yeah.
Now she's on the corrective course.
Yeah.
So she was actually praying to Lord Shiva while the application, as Prabhupada mentioned in one of the talk, she was actually putting an application. So was that being asked from Lord Shiva? What was Lord Shiva's reaction?
Doesn't describe. Not that I've ever read. Have you ever read anything about Toshan? I've never read anything where that's discussed. So yeah, I have no idea. But as I was mentioning the other day, it seems to me like that there's this element of Yoga Maya being involved in here, because we see from the outcome of this act that actually it causes, or it precipitates Lord Krishna's pastimes. So whether her prayers, how fervent her prayers were to Lord Shiva, because she didn't want to offend Lord Shiva. Now, if there is this element, how Yoga Maya is involved and how it's precipitating the pastimes of the Lord, there's a good chance that Lord Shiva has knowledge of that. I'm not saying he does, but there's a chance he might have knowledge of that, because he is a greatly elevated devotee. and so it may be that he wouldn't get involved. I don't know. But I couldn't really directly answer that question because I've never read anything like that. The Acharyas don't, as far as I know, don't give any comment on that. At least Jiva Goswami and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur don't. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah. Sorry? Yeah. Well, so the thing is, like, the process of bhakti is a manifestation of the compassion of the Lord. Because if we look at, especially, okay, Gorpaneem's just passed, but if we reflect on the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and then we reflect on Advaita Acharya, and this is going back 500 years ago, right, where things were nowhere near as degraded as they are now. We live in a pretty degraded time, and it's not improving. It's destined to get much, much worse than what it is now. But there will be a pause or a temporary lull in that, for at least for a few thousand years, due to the process of Krishna consciousness. But if we look back then, Advaita Acharya was considering it was such a degraded age because people were misusing the Vedic texts, etc., like that. And so he was seeing how people were suffering, how people were so bewildered in this age. So out of compassion, he appealed to the Lord to descend. So out of compassion for the fallen conditioned soul. And this is the nature, the real essence of a Vaishnava, is that they're paradukha dukhi. When they see others suffering, they also suffer as a result. But in this age, it's like, like, have you ever watched the news? And what does the news contain? Yeah, the suffering of others. And people love it. They're like news junkies. Some people just like news junkies. They've got to know whatever's going on in the news. Because why? Because they're seeing everyone else suffer. And they're suffering more than I am, so I'm not doing so bad. So it seems like in this age, people are paradukha sukhi. When they see someone suffering, they become happy. But this is not the nature of Vaishnava, and certainly not the nature of the Lord. Is when the Vaishnava sees someone suffering, he feels impelled to do something about it. He feels impelled to do something to change the situation. And so therefore we see Advaita Acharya, when he saw this suffering, he realized, I can't do anything about this, but you might, this is a very degraded age, but you, my Lord, you can do something about this. And we'll see in a later purport, I think it's maybe it's somewhere else I was reading this morning, but Prabhupada was saying that when the irreligious principles become very, very corrupted, then this is the time for the Lord to appear. So one might consider, in this age of Kali, well, isn't this a ripe time for Krishna to appear? Things are getting worse and worse and worse. But he has appeared. He's appeared in his holy name. So in this age, the Lord's manifested, and this, it mentions this in the 11th canto. What's that verse? Kirtanare Krishnasya Mukta Sangha Parambrajet. That the Lord has appeared as his holy name, and through chanting the holy name, Mukta Sangha Parambrajet, that people will be able to become liberated from this inauspicious situation, this inauspicious association, Parambrajet, and go to that supreme destination, simply by the chanting of Hare Krishna. So this is the compassion of the Lord, because he's descended as his name, so that we can engage directly with him. Because, to engage directly with Krishna, and this is one of the importances of deity worship, is because, with our material senses, we can only experience matter. We can't experience the Supreme Lord, because he's transcendental. Our body is just matter. There's no, you can't experience matter, transcendence with matter. So he appears as the deity, again out of compassion. This is Prabhupada would often refer to the Archa Vigraha as the mercy manifestation of the Lord. He appears in a way that the conditioned living entities can interact. But of course, with deity worship, there's some prior qualification required, i.e. you have to be a Brahmana to cook or to worship. But with the holy name, there's no prior qualification. As we see it mentions in the Shastastikam prayers, There are no rules or regulations in this chanting of Hare Krishna. So this is the mercy of Krishna, of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He appears in this age to disseminate the Yuga Dharma of chanting Hare Krishna. And he doesn't ask anything from us. It's just chant Hare Krishna. And so it's just out of compassion. That's all it is. So, it's kind of interesting, because when you reflect on the compassionate nature of the Lord, the compassionate nature of the Vaishnavas, then, for someone who's a little bit together, they'll start to feel a sense of gratitude. And therefore, okay, I want to respond, I want to reciprocate with this, because Krishna and the Vaishnavas, out of their compassion, have given me this opportunity to, get out of this situation. So we're very fortunate, actually, to have this opportunity to take to the chanting of Hare Krishna. And it's something worth reflecting on every day, is how fortunate we are that we have this condition or this position, because so many people don't. So many living entities don't have this, and even it's presented to them, they're so covered by the modes of nature, particularly ignorance and passion, that they can't see how fortunate, how wonderful an opportunity it is to escape their material condition, because they're thinking they've got a good situation. But it's good to reflect on this daily, our good fortune that we've come in contact with this process. Okay. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna, Hare